Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Stephen Pohl with the Ohio Business Podcast. We're here with the founder of The Source, Anthony Granitsas. Thanks for coming on, first off.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I was really excited when you reached out and asked us to be on, your podcast.
So how about you give us a little, backstory of how this idea came into fruition? And because you guys haven't launched operations yet, so how about a little bit of backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to Ohio State. It's what brought me here to Columbus. So I'll start by saying go Bucks. And in my undergraduate career, right. In my undergraduate career, I studied public affairs and business administration. So a lot of that education was centered around, policy research, brief writing. And a lot of the research I did was about poverty in Columbus, vacant housing, and, mainly what spoke to me most, food insecurity. So mixing that with my business education, I became really interested in social enterprises. I worked for a local social enterprise, the Roosevelt Coffee House downtown. I worked there as a barista for a while. And the community really, just spoke to me. And the mission behind a potentially capitalistic venture, a for-profit venture, not the Roosevelt, but, as a concept, a for-profit venture that gives back to a community, I think speaks volumes. And that experience mixed with my experience of, the food industry. I've worked for several different restaurants, kind of inspired me to, take the reins myself and see where I could make a difference, using the education I obtained from Ohio State, mixed with my experience in the food industry, kind of just led me to think about how I can make a difference, in that realm with those assets. And so that's what inspired Source Restaurant. We are a for-profit enterprise that helps feed those who experience food insecurity. And the plan is to do that through means of a consumer-based restaurant based here in Columbus. So, like you said, we are in the beginning, but there's a lot we're looking forward to, and a lot of work we're doing every day that really, is hoping to change the bigger picture and really help communities that experience food insecurity in this city.
Mm-hmm. What stage are you at? How long have you been working on this? And then how many people are involved so far?
Yeah, so I've been working on this for, basically this calendar year. And the amount of headway that I've gained in 7 months' time has been completely surpassed all of my expectations. So currently, Source is part of a social enterprise accelerator program through Change, which is it's a program based here in Columbus, and it's seen, if you're familiar with the company AntFlow with Claire Coder, she went through that program and she has made so much monumental change with her company. And so it kind of inspired me to apply to this program that helps social enterprises like mine get off the ground through an intense program that features different mentors, business planning, financial planning. I mean, it's the whole package. So really that's what kind of kicked me in the behind to get me going, was my acceptance into this program, which has proven so valuable already. The amount of resources available to me and the connections that I have made could not have come to me in any better form. In terms of a team, oddly enough, currently it's just me. I do all of the, all of the work, which is a lot of networking right now. Mm-hmm. Just because it's only me right now does not mean that is a goal. Source is very open to and encourages local organization working with another local organization. We're in the middle of a lot of talks right now with food-centric missions like the Mid-Ohio Food Bank. We're consulting with different local chefs to talk about menu development. We're talking with people who have worked in the fundraising space. It's just, we are talking to so many different people, hoping to form these solid, cohesive relationships so that way we can turn this into something much bigger than just me working on something alone. So it's hard to take it in, slow and steady strides. It's hard to not move too quickly when there are so many people who are willing to jump on this project and help out. So like I said, it's caused a lot to happen since January, and you would think that it's an odd time surrounding COVID-19 and everything. Who would be, who would have enough energy and enough drive to open a restaurant in such a trying time? But you would be surprised at how many people who are telling me that now is an ideal time to do it.
It's either the absolute worst time or it's the absolutely best, because competition to come in is absolutely not there. There's a lot of people going out of business, but also just the restaurants are always going to be there. But, just now it's just, there's a little bit of uncertainty, how long it's going to be until, full capacity and all that. So it's either the worst or the best. So
exactly.
I love that you're on right now during this COVID crisis. So,
it's going pretty well. So that's kind of like where we're at in terms of progress.
What are you guys thinking from a I don't know, are you thinking physical location? Are you thinking about partnering, with local businesses? What's kind of, are you thinking physical location? What are you thinking in that frontier?
So one of the important things about the Source venture is the give back model. So you have essentially two different schools of thought. You have the restaurant model, which is important because surviving in the restaurant industry is a challenge within itself. I mean, it is a hell of a lot of work to run a restaurant. And then you add on top of that a social venture where you have a project that's as big as feeding people who can't afford to or have trouble with finding food to eat every day. These communities, and you would be surprised, you can drive down High Street and pass through a community that experiences no food insecurity, and then a mile or two down the road be in a very food insecure community. So you have this project that kind of tries to tackle that. And that is what matters most to me as a founder. I always want to remember why I started this venture in the first place, and it is ultimately to help build equitable communities. Now, that being said, I'm working on staggering our startup operations. So instead of just jumping into a brick and mortar venue, opening restaurant doors and saying, hey, come eat, I want to focus on getting our give back model as secure and as operationally efficient as possible before we move into the much more intricate and delicate model of owning and operating a restaurant.
Yeah, so kind of focus on the give back, and then once you have more stable cash flows, then you kind of focus on those bigger expenses that are going to be fixed, right?
Well, it's not even about cash flow in the beginning. So a lot of our organizational partnerships are aimed towards utilizing standing resources. So essentially, what I'm looking to do right now is open a food truck where I work on the give back model with a partner. Let's say that partner is offering resources, a food supply that are already standing but not yet being used. We would be able to utilize our food truck in partnership with an organization, another food-centric organization, to actually go out and start making meal contributions to food insecure communities prior to even making our first sale to a paying customer. And like I said, that's very intentional because we care so deeply and we are so focused on feeding communities with food insecurity that I would rather get that down and make no money for a little while than jump into a brick and mortar venue and forget why we opened in the first place. So that being said, we will be making some customer sales, but mostly in the name of getting consumer feedback, because another aspect that is very important to me in terms of the actual restaurant side of things is the customer experience. Many people go to a restaurant for the food, yes, but they also go to have a time, to have an experience. So collecting as much consumer feedback before we open our full set of operations is very important to me. And I can accomplish both of those things, establishing the give back model and getting consumer feedback from a mobilized food truck first. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. We're looking for a truck. And once we establish that in our different partnerships we have going on right now, we tie up those loose ends, and then Source is already giving back to the community. And so that's what's the most exciting part, that we will be able to give back before we even make our first dollar. I think it's a very aspirational goal, but I think it's one that, we can attain.
Mm-hmm. Now, what does the give back model look like? Are you going to go to shelters? Are you going to just, I don't know, pop ups? I don't know. Mm-hmm. How would you explain it? What are your plans on how that looks?
Absolutely. So this give back model is very focused around meeting people where they are. So essentially, for every meal we sell, we are going to donate a meal to a community that experiences food insecurity. What that looks like will always take place in a food truck. And of course, these details are changing on a weekly basis, but the overarching idea is that even when we move into a brick and mortar location, we will host our give back model from a food truck. Mm-hmm. And the reason why that is we can actually go into the communities that require equitable and sound resources. So that way we can meet these people where they are. It is my own personal belief that you should not have to leave the community where you live, where you create relationships, where you grow, to find something to eat. And so I would never ask people to have to come to my physical restaurant in order to eat. I would much rather prefer to meet them where they are. And so what that looks like is utilizing kitchen resources, utilizing staff to help prepare meals, and transporting them into these communities. Now, if that means we serve lunch at a school district in a food insecure community and then dinner near a community park, that might be what that looks like. But we're going to use very sound and already established impact metrics to decide where it is we can make the biggest impact first, and then eventually grow from there.
Do you have a menu planned out yet? Specific, style so far?
Yeah. So I don't want to give away too much information. I do like what we're thinking in terms of food topic and food category. We're going to be an Italian bistro, I'm hoping. And the food truck, the sales we will make to the paying customer will be a very niche aspect of our market, and what our menu will entail when we actually open a restaurant. So the food truck will be a very limited menu, based on the concept of what I'm thinking right now is Roman street food, and Italian street food. And then we will basically take a concept we're working on for that, and expand and build on that for a more complete menu when we actually open in a brick and mortar venue. Now, I will say what we are going to do is have two separate menus. We are going to have our paying customer menu and then what we're calling a give back menu. And essentially that give back menu is a small list of very nutritional, great tasting meals that a customer can choose which give back meal they donate from. So they'll come in, for example, let's say I'm a paying customer. I'll come into Source Restaurant, I'll order my food, and then from the separate menu, I will also get to choose what meal is donated in terms of my meal. Now, we did this for a couple of reasons. One, it really creates this experience for customers that inspires them and empowers them to give back. We are able to all give back in such small but so meaningful and impactful ways in just our everyday lives and the things we do every day. One of those things should be eating out. So we set it up to really put the giving back into the customer's hands to hopefully empower them to go make more monumental change in other ways, other places. And so that's the goal. That's the goal.
I love this idea because number one, I feel Columbus, like you had said this earlier, you do cross the street and you have, areas where it's well-off areas, and then you cross the street and then it's a totally different area. And then also it's kind of like that footwear model where you buy a shoe and you give a shoe back to someplace in Africa, but this is more communal, and you could basically kind of see that take place. But it's also kind of like paying it forward because, you hear about those people that are like, they're in front of you in line and they're like, can you buy the next guy behind me his food? Right. It's like a chain. So I really like how you really structured all those ideas into this concept. I love the idea.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it definitely took a lot of, and it is taking a lot of work to perfect that, because unfortunately, there is still money involved. We still have to find a way to pay for everything. And so being able to focus on impact and focus on the consumer experience is the goal, but while still being able to sustain ourselves. So it's a challenge. And, I'm very thankful for the opportunity we have through the Sea Change program I mentioned at the beginning, to have a lot of resources at our disposal to help with that process. So it is, it is very detailed, and that's why it's taking the time it takes, but I think it'll be worth it. I really do.
Do you have any kind of, estimate on, maybe a, launch, just maybe idealistically any?
Yeah, that is a hard question. I'm hoping that within the next couple of months, we will actually come into a truck and purchase a truck. Once that happens, we really have to hit the ground running. So what that will look like is we will obtain the truck, finish building it out so that way it meets regulation and everything like that. Finish making the organizational, partnerships we need to make. Start giving back. So after we actually obtain the truck, I would like to actually get it on the road to start giving back within 6 months. So if I get a truck today, let's say I get off this call and immediately go buy a truck, which would be difficult, but and very unlikely. But if that were to happen, 6 months would be the goal. Now, that being said, the question for the paying customer is, how long do I have to wait to actually be able to purchase a meal? And that is a good question. I'm hoping that once we open the truck, it won't be any more than 12 months time before we get into a venue. Now, with the restaurant industry, that's pretty hard to put a pinpoint on, because let's say I come across an opportunity in the next 3 months that I absolutely cannot pass up in a restaurant venue. Then I may have to restructure my model and actually open a brick and mortar location before the food truck. So it's absolutely hard to say, and being able to plan and organize an entire business around such a fragilely changing situation is extremely difficult. Because you said it yourself at the beginning of this call, a lot of restaurants are closing down. And what happens when that occurs is a shift in the market. Old restaurants go out, new restaurants come in. You see it happen all the time. What's happening right now is a mass exodus of restaurant industry, like the already standing restaurant industry, which leaves a lot of room for new restaurants and growth, to happen. That's just supply and demand, basics. That's, economics 1. And so operating in a field where that's the case makes it very hard to solidly plan outside of, your resources and your operations and, things like that, because anything can happen. And, having to adjust to that is very hard. But, I'm glad that I haven't learned to open a business in a time outside of this one, because if we can do it now and we can do it successfully now, I believe we'll be fine. And so far, so good. So that's kind of, the mindset I'm taking on for now.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a time during a down market such as this, where it's specifically affecting the service industry, there's definitely going to be some distressed sellers. So, there could be a fat deal for a food truck or a potential opening for, brick and mortar spot. So, now's the time to find those distressed sellers, so there's opportunities out there. Now, is it going to be in Columbus? I don't know, but to find those, like that food truck.
Right.
Yeah. What else was I going to say? Dang. So you don't do this full time, correct?
Currently, I'm not doing it full time yet. So I do work a full-time job, which means that all or most of this work all of this work has to happen after hours. So the accelerator program, a lot of my meetings all happen, post 5 p.m., post 6 p.m., which, is another layer of a challenge when, opening up a business, because it should be, and it is a full-time job. So putting in 80 hours a week between, both ventures is, my full-time job and the Source restaurant. It is a challenge, but eventually I will have to, take that pledge and commit myself full-time 40 hours a week to this venture. And so also preparing myself for that is, a challenge within itself, because, a lot of restaurants not even just restaurants, but businesses when they're startups aren't profitable for a long time.
2 to 3 years around minimum average.
Exactly. And so being able to prep yourself for 2 to 3 years of not making too much money,
living lean.
it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Definitely reading books on how to live leaner. Trust me. But full-time, not quite yet.
How much time or hours per week have you been putting towards the Source?
I would say that I'm putting as much time into this as I am putting into my full-time job. So like I said, there are weeks where I don't get done until 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and I still have work to do. And that's not just my experience as an entrepreneur. Even if I worked full-time in this position, I'm absolutely positive that would be the case, because there's so much, and this was news to me as well, that I don't think I had a clear picture in my head of just how much had to go into this to make it work. And I'm only about, less than halfway in, like less than 50% of this journey is complete. Less than 25% of this journey is complete. And being able to plan for the next day, for the next week, is incredibly difficult, especially when you have to juggle a full-time job and, trying to be the CEO and founder of, a social enterprise. It's extremely difficult. But rewarding.
Yeah. So would you say everything up till now has kind of been strategic planning, and now you're kind of entering that execution phase, and then, boots on the ground? Would you say that?
Yeah. So it's been a very odd combination of both the entire way through. So, this week I might plan to do a lot of organizational planning, financial projections, operations planning, market research. And then halfway through the week realize that I have to actually get on the ground and go, look at a potential kitchen for a partnership. I just went over to the Reeve Avenue Center the other day on South Side to look at, some of their resources there in hopes of a potential collaboration. And that was not something that 2 weeks ago I planned on doing. So there's a lot of difference between, what is planned and what actually happens. So in terms of becoming full-time boots on the ground, I don't think I'm quite there yet. There will be days in the future, potentially the near future, potentially the distant future, where I will have to be out all day. And that's hard, you know. It's kind of crazy how a lot of meetings have come onto Zoom now. It actually keeps me less boots on the ground than it would if I had started this venture a year ago and was able to meet with people in person.
Mm-hmm.
If that were the case, then I would be out a lot more. But I don't have to be. So it's kind of touch and go in terms of, you know, the planning, what goes into the planning and what goes into the executing. It's hard to plan for.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to put on the calendar and say, today is going to be boots on the ground, or today is going to be largely behind the scenes work. I couldn't put an accurate percentage on it, but I will say it's helped concentrate everything with things like this, which is like Zoom meetings and meetings over the phone have definitely helped.
Do you have any type of marketing strategy? Are you going to look towards certain, you know, platforms, avenues? What are you thinking on that front?
Yeah, so I will definitely need a very cohesive marketing team. If there's one thing that I have learned in my time in the restaurant industry is marketing brings people in. What happens when they get there keeps them coming. So obviously a lot of the work for a new venture will be getting people to come in that first time, you know? So we're doing a lot of connecting on LinkedIn right now. We are active on LinkedIn. The Source restaurant page is up, but we're still going through, you know, the very intense and laborious process of branding is so much more in depth than I thought.
Yeah, it's a long game. That's for sure.
Yeah, it really is. Creating a cohesive and meaningful brand that embodies the mission and embodies the vision is so complex and takes so much more work than I thought in the beginning. And so a lot of the marketing plans that I have are on hold until I can come up and work with a marketer, you know, to come up and establish that brand. But social media is a powerful thing. We will plan to be very active on social media, particularly LinkedIn, Instagram. And you see this a lot more with the hospitality industry and the food industry now is activism on social media. I mean, think about everybody who follows Wendy's on Twitter, for example. Now, Wendy's is huge. They're also fast food. And so it might be a far comparison, but a lot of people love Wendy's Twitter because that is one of their main avenues, you know, of marketing to a certain demographic. And so, you know, you have to consider a lot of things, you know, the demographic you're trying to reach, specifically geographical demographic. I mean, the people in Columbus all respond to marketing in a different way than the people in Cleveland and the people in Cincinnati. And so marketing, you're entirely correct. It's a long game. And am I ever going to think I have a full hand and a full grasp on the marketing game? No, I probably won't. So that's another thing that changes every day. You would think I'd be a lot more stressed with everything that's changing every day, but honestly, the fast-paced, you know, of it all, it's exciting, it's exhilarating, and it keeps me going. Definitely keeps me excited.
Constantly learning, probably. I mean, it's a different landscape. Well, I mean, it's been great to talk to somebody who's absolutely inspiration, you know, inspiring, absolutely going after what they want, going after a cause that is, you know, beneficial towards Columbus. I love what you're doing. Where can people find the Source? How can they connect with you? How can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the easiest ways to connect with Source Restaurant right now is LinkedIn. I have a page active for Source on LinkedIn. I will be posting this podcast, you know, on that page. So anybody who wants to listen to it can find it there, can find it on your page. Outside of that, we have a website www.sourcerestaurant.org. You can find my contact information there. There will be updates there. We'll potentially be launching a crowdsourcing for funding campaign, which you'll be able to find there. It's not currently up, but we will announce when it is. And then additionally, a lot of people are reaching out just to me on LinkedIn. And that's a really solid way as well. I'm active on LinkedIn way too much for anybody who, I don't hate networking, but it's a good thing because I have to be so active on LinkedIn. But so reach out to me on LinkedIn, visit our LinkedIn page for Source, go to the Source Restaurant website. And I'm, willing to get a meeting on the books with anybody who's interested. So if there's one thing that listeners are, interested in hearing, it's please reach out. Partnerships are something that I very much believe in. So it's really important to me to hear from almost everybody. All experience is good experience.
Correct.
And new insights are always welcome. So that'd be my message.
One word of advice to entrepreneurs out there. What would you say?
As a first-time entrepreneur and somebody who's learning more every day, I would say, don't be afraid to actually take the leap. One of my biggest fears is this won't work. And that's something that is not unique to me as an aspiring entrepreneur. One of the biggest things a lot of entrepreneurs say is, what if this doesn't work? And my biggest piece of advice is work until it does, because there's a lot of things about Source Restaurant that still don't work, but I don't intend to give up. I don't intend to let it die. I just go back to the drawing board. I meet with somebody else and I learn from every experience, from every failure. And if I can do it, certainly everybody can do it. So that would be my advice.
Beautifully put. I would love to have you on when this comes into physical form again.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Thanks for coming on. That was beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. No problem. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited. And, I've been listening to the podcast. I've listened to, many of the other people you've had on, and it's definitely inspiring. So I love what you're doing with the podcast as well. And I'm certainly excited to hear more and honored to be on. So thank you so much.
I want to introduce you guys to the Ohio Business Podcast first sponsor, Nextdoor. Want to earn extra cash with your extra space? There's an app for that, to Nextdoor, the marketplace for your storage space. Nextdoor is currently taking on new hosts like me. Simply visit their site, nextdoor.com, nxtstor.com, to get the app. Just think what an extra $200 a month can mean to you by simply storing your friends' boxes and mattresses. Once again, check out nextdoor.com. Thanks. The Ohio Business Podcast is sponsored by Jansen Media. Jansen Media is a website design and digital marketing agency. They develop custom strategies and solutions around client goals and business objectives. From day one, they have been focused on results, building websites that deliver more online traffic, more conversions, better user experience, easy navigation, and web functionality. You can find Jansen Media on their website at jansenmedia.com. That's spelled JANSCEN media.com. That's jansenmedia.com. Thanks.